Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to a Fresh Stories book chat. We are here with somebody very exciting today, and I'm going to let her introduce herself. And then we're going to dive into this book, which I'm pretty sure every human being needs to have a copy of. Colette, can you please tell us who you are?
Yes. So my name's Colette Jane Fair. I'm the author of The Cost of Quiet: How to Have the Hard Conversations That Create Secure, Lasting Love. I'm a licensed psychotherapist in Florida. I've been working with couples for almost 14 years now. I specialize in couples therapy. I also work a lot with people going through divorce and breakups. And I am an internationally recognized relationship expert. I have two podcasts of my own, Insights from the Couch and Love Thy Neighbor. And I also recently did a TEDx talk that was a TED editor's pick called Secrets from a Couples Therapist. So hopefully everyone will check that one out too. And I'm just so grateful to be here. This is my first book, and it's already been a life changing experience in many ways.
Yes. So let's get into it. I feel like as somebody that is divorced, having these hard conversations is probably the thing that was hardest to do in my marriage, right? So I grew up like oldest daughter, oldest grandchild, people pleaser, right? All of the things. I did not want to rock the boat. And you are rocking the boat with this book here, Colette. So what is the cost of quiet generally about here?
Yes, thank you. So first, let me just say, I too am the first daughter, first grandchild,
Mm-hmm.
people pleaser in recovery, I like to say. And in
Yep.
my first marriage, I did not want to rock the boat at all. And
Yeah.
that's really the initial inspiration for the book. And then, of course, my years of work as a therapist. But what it's about is that quiet, in this case, is really a euphemism for avoiding conversations, avoiding conflict. It's so natural, even if you're not a people pleaser, because of the way we're wired to be such relational beings, that our close relationships and keeping them connected, we really need that to survive and thrive. In fact, relationships, they don't have to be romantic, but our closest relationships, the quality of the connection is the number one predictor of a long, happy life. We know this from the 85-year Harvard study on adult development. It's pretty profound, right? So,
Huh?
because of this, conflict naturally feels scary. It feels like someone's telling you to go put your hand on a hot stove. We want to keep our connection strong. And we, of course, think with the best of intentions that if we don't say the thing that's only going to get into a fight, right, we don't know how to handle it. We don't know how to express ourselves. We're sure our partner will respond poorly, and sometimes we're right. And so, because of all of this, it just feels easier, if not advantageous. It feels protective of our relationships to just not bring up that sticky thing. But then what happens is the opposite of what we intend. It becomes a self fulfilling prophecy where avoiding the problem becomes the problem. And I do give in the book many ways. I give the top 10 ways people avoid, and not all of them are quiet, which is, I like to say, quiet is a euphemism for this because some of them, bickering, criticizing, anything that is, we're doing this to sidestep the hard work of going inside, figuring out what we feel and need, and expressing it clearly, vulnerably, and kindly.
You know, one of my biggest critiques of many self help books that are on the market these days is that the people who write them didn't actually live the thing that they're talking about. And you did. So
Yes.
can you take us back a little bit into your like origin story of how this book came to be?
Yeah, thank you. And I really try to be open about this because my first marriage was a disaster despite the best of intentions. And I'm not even pointing fingers. In fact, I feel like I take a lot of responsibility with the role I played, as we all should. It takes two to tango, and our work is to look at ourselves. So, just to give a little bit of context, I came out of a divorced parents, really great people, but my mom is a lawyer, my dad's a doctor, very strong-willed, New Yorkers, right? Like, I'm Italian, Irish. There were no shrinking violets in my family. And when my parents' marriage started to go poorly, there was a lot of fighting, and it was destructive conflict, which I really differentiate in the book. There's not all conflict is good. Conflict itself isn't bad, but it's how you handle it. So all that fighting was very distressing for me, as you can imagine. And I grew up with this fantasy idea of what my marriage was going to be like. I wanted to have no arguing. I wanted really like this knight in shining armor to come rescue me. And I was never going to be difficult or to be those things that at the time, not understanding, I thought my mom was being difficult. I was a kid. So in college at 18 years old, on the first day of school, drunk in a bar, I met my knight in shining armor. And he was a great guy in so many ways. He'd grown up in a really Southern family where conflict was completely avoided. It was the opposite of mine. I thought this was nirvana. Oh my God, these people never frown. There's no raised voices. They don't even debate anything. And what I didn't understand is, of course, and by the way, I'm still close to my ex husband's family. I love them. Going to Hawaii for Christmas, and my husband and I are staying at their house. So, no bad blood, but they were very conflict avoidant. And I didn't know the cost of that. And I didn't realize that they had just as many problems. They were just swept under the rug. And I think that that dynamic worked in my first marriage until it didn't. By the time I started to mature and know myself, and really after I had a child, and I actually needed my husband emotionally for the first time, he was very avoidant. And he'd be the first to admit that now, too. He's also remarried and has learned a lot and grown himself, but he really wasn't there for me emotionally. And so I'd get these messages that if I brought something up, I was being difficult or I'm making a big deal out of nothing, or Colette, you're so emotional. And so I just stopped trying and I allowed that to really steal my voice. And I became filled with resentment and bitterness. And I really quiet quit the relationship and didn't know I was doing it. And so eventually it all blew up. We had a really messy divorce with young kids. I made a lot of mistakes, even though I think in our case, maybe divorce really was the right outcome. And sometimes that's the case. We chose each other as children. I realized after I did my own counseling and as I became a therapist, like, wow, I really had a role to play here. And I wish I had spoken up for myself, regardless of how he responded. And then for years, I hear this in particular from women in my office where they desperately want to be connected. They do want to communicate. They're scared of their partner's response, and then they end up abandoning themselves. So, the mission of this book is to give people a method that I call self connected communication for how to make sure you don't lose your voice, regardless of your partner, because you can't control them, right? And that you invite somebody into emotional intimacy with you and can take care of yourself if they can't meet you there.
There's so much I wanna unpack here.
I know
I
there's
just
so much,
I
right?
love it, I love it. Well, I think it's really a book like this is so important because in this day and age with TikTok and social media and all of these things, there's so many, like, mental health buzzwords, right, like, going around all over the place.
Totally.
And sometimes it's just a matter of you and your partner didn't grow up learning how to communicate with each other, right? There's no bad blood, there's no abuse. It's just that you literally don't know how to speak to each other. And I feel like The Cost of Quiet, this book is really going to be the solution for a lot of people's relationships just on how to like start that communication again.
You're so right. I think most of us don't grow up learning how to communicate. Even when people tell me, look, I had a pretty good childhood, it was kind of leave it to beaver. Nobody was fighting. My parents loved each other. That's great. But especially if you're over the age of 35, 40, nobody was even paying attention to emotional attunement. Conflict was usually handled away from the children, or your parents maybe were relatively happy, but it was kind of surfacey. They were sweeping it under the rug. In today's world, we expect more from relationships. And this isn't just romantic. This same communication method applies to friendships, family relationships, colleagues. We owe it to ourselves as healthy, mature, empowered women to be able to speak our truth. And what we don't want to do is like swing from people pleasing, suppression, and self silencing to being aggressive or reactive right? We want to find that middle place where we can really connect inside, be emotionally regulated, and say, this is what I felt when this happened, and here's what I really need. And the truth is, we're not always going to get those needs met, but we will never get them met if we don't articulate it in this way.
Yeah. You mentioned the abandonment of self and how that's like really the crux of all of this. How does that play out in everyday life for a woman?
Oh my God, I see it every day, and I used to be there myself. So when I say the cost of quiet, the ultimate cost is that you lose yourself. And this is what I really want women to have, because we know we're both divorced women. And while
Yep.
I'm remarried, there's no guarantees in life. Relationships are inherently unsafe. Anything can happen to any one of us, but we always have ourselves. And as grown-ups, we really have to build a relationship from our vulnerability, our inner child part, if you want to call it that. I do in the book, and I like to think of it that way. That little girl we once were is still in this body, right? Even
Uh-huh.
buried underneath the sun damage and wrinkles, she's in there. And she needs our care. Every one of us has to be doing that. And we have to have a relationship with our wise adult selves. Every time we swallow something because we doubt whether or not our needs are reasonable, or we don't want to be seen as difficult, which, let's face it, as women, we are still often unfairly judged as difficult, even for being gently assertive, which is bullshit, but society's got a long way to go. We have to show up for us. And there is a way to get very clear and to put our needs out there. The whole reason we have emotions really is to point us to our needs. And so many women will sit here in my office and say, "Well, I don't even know what I need," or "I don't know what I feel." They're confused because society gives so many messages that we should be nice and good girls, and many of us have been dismissing our own needs so often, so quickly, we're not attuned to them. But you do know, and you just have to tune in and be willing to listen, and then be willing to have the courage to put it out there in a calm, clear, but very vulnerable way.
And that's the tools that the book will provide
Yes,
for sure.
yes,
So I have a two-part question
yes.
for you. Have you seen your clients using this strategy with their children? And how important is it to model that for your children?
Oh my gosh, I think if we wanna change the world, we've gotta model this for our kids. I will admit, I did a poor job of this early on. I think I went through a very bad time after my divorce, and looking back, I feel like I wasn't a great mom for a couple of years there. I was not a therapist yet. I didn't know what I didn't know. I was operating out of bad coping mechanisms, and I'll be the first to admit, just because I like to normalize things for people and also not live in shame, that I coped with my divorce by like chain smoking cigarettes on my back porch, drinking 3 glasses of wine, living in fight or flight, running around trying to find a job, work a job. I didn't have any family nearby. It was kind of a disaster. And I have talked to my daughters a lot about this. They're in their 20s now. I've acknowledged their wounds from this time. And also, I'm trying to do this with them now. And I have really great relationships with them. And I have some regrets that I can't go back and do, because I think being a mom is like the most important job you do ever. And I wish I could have done a better job, but I did the best I could at the time. And certainly I love my girls more than anything. I am trying now to impart these lessons both as I guide them through. They turn to me a lot with their romantic relationships. So that way, but also in how I interact with them. Even something as simple as, I have one daughter that calls me every day, tells me everything about her life. I have another one that tends to call when there's a crisis or she needs money. And just saying, "Hey, I want you to live your life. But when you don't contact me, or you only contact me because you need money, I feel hurt. I feel neglected. And my relationship with you is very important to me. I really need for you to make an effort to be in contact with me just a little bit more, so that I don't feel like as if I'm used." That's my story.
Uh-huh.
And the more we show people that it's okay to confront, and that we're willing to be vulnerable about our deeper feelings, without blame, without accusation, without just staying at the surface frustration. When we do that, we really invite people into the opportunity to be vulnerable themselves, to drop their protection, to be less reactive. And I've seen my daughters respond very well to this. They feel safe with me. They come to me with everything. They even feel safe enough to tell me, like, Mom, you were so distracted during those divorce years. And we remember you chain smoking on the back porch. But we can talk about that and we can repair. And I can say, that must have been very confusing. I was going through so much and you shouldn't have had to see me so distracted and stressed. And I'm really sorry. So I think this open communication is also really about the opportunity to repair and take accountability and not let our own wounds and our own shame prevent us from listening to others and saying, you know what, I was wrong and I'm really sorry and I'm going to do better. And this is how we build close connected relationships. It's not by being perfect, it's by being human and being willing to take accountability and being willing to share like our deepest places instead of
Yeah.
trying to be performative and polished.
Yeah. And I'm sure it heals a lot of generational trauma at
Yes.
the same time.
It does, and I see it in my office every day that when people drop their defenses, whatever happens, even when they don't decide to stay together, it's so healing. It's something that a legacy we can really leave for the younger generation. I will say also, this is one exciting thing to me as a mom of Gen Z daughters. Gen Z is they're so open to feelings. They may have other issues, like they gotta get out of bed and stop bed rotting and,
Yeah.
maybe get a little more work ethic, some of them, but they are so receptive to the vulnerability and the honesty. So I do think this is changing things.
Yeah.
I just think as a Gen X woman and all the older people I see in my office, everything was like, push it down, move on, be strong, be self reliant. And this is not how we're designed as humans.
No, I mean, I'm millennial and I'm an elder millennial, and we were the same. Like, it was like, just go back to your computer. Like,
Yes, you're
go.
fine. You're
Yeah, you're
fine.
fine. You're
Suck it up.
fine. You're fine. Everything was you're fine. You're fine. Which I started saying to my son when he was born, and I was like, "Wait, he's not fine." I'm like, I'm not going to keep repeating this. You're fine. You're fine." It's so interesting. So there really is a very big cost to quiet, which is obviously why you wrote the book. So who would you say is the ideal reader for this? Obviously everybody, but who would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think people either coming out of relationships wanting to really learn and do their own self work. I really wrote it for individuals. I wrote it for women, but it applies to everybody, non binary, gender fluid, men, everybody. And I make a point of saying at the beginning, I wrote it for women because I'm a woman and because I could hear so many people saying the exact same things. But I think either someone coming out of a relationship wanting to really change their patterns of communication, somebody in a really healthy relationship who wants to make sure it's rock solid and that they deepen intimacy and they learn how to handle conflict because you're really only as good as how you show up in conflict.
Uh-huh.
Anyone can enjoy a nice surface marriage, right? Where like you have the cars and the lifestyle and the vacations and the Christmas card. I had that too. It looked freaking perfect from the outside. But life is going to throw you curveballs and you have to be able to navigate those differences. And then, of course, I also wrote it for people who are in a really stuck place. It is often not too late. And I do think this message is very important that a lot of times women will say to me, I've tried and tried and tried. I've communicated, and I was there too until I'm blue in the face and nothing works. A lot of times it's not coming out as clearly and cleanly as you think, which is why this method of self connected communication is so important. And then if you do adhere to the method and you're really taking care of your side of the street and your partner can't or won't do the work, meet you there for whatever reason, and there are many, then you have valuable information much earlier about what your relationship can and cannot be. and choices with what to do with it, whether you want to stay or go. And I do get into a lot of that in the book as well.
I love that so much. It's just so important to have somebody spelling this out for us. And also I'm thinking too as you're talking, what a great tool for the sandwich generation of people who are caring for their parents also right now because a lot of those older parents did not learn any of these communication skills and you still want to, you can have a relationship with them even in the later part of their life. And so,
Yes.
you could use it for your parents and your children.
I just
Um
used it with my mom the other day, this very method. She, like,
yeah.
lost her temper and screamed at me, and I went back, and she didn't say sorry, and I expressed how I felt, and I asked for an apology, and to her credit, she was like, "You're right, I lost my temper, I'm really sorry," rather than just swallowing it, right? Because then when you address these small things and you address them well, you don't build up the layer of resentment. And that's what I really want for women because that resentment, like they say, is drinking poison, expecting someone else to die. It will make you sick mentally and physically.
Yeah, and I'll say because I've read the book, that as somebody that's post-divorce, I have done so much healing, and yet it's so scary to think about getting into another relationship, and how do I express myself? And this literally gives you everything you need to learn how to do that. So my favorite question I love to ask before we go is if somebody is walking through the bookstore and sees the book title and gets nervous because they know once they open that book, it's going to be like Pandora's book and they're never going to get to go back again. What would you say to them? Why should they open this book?
Because this is ultimately about feeling better inside of you and feeling confident, empowered, healthy, free. If nothing else, no matter what relationship you apply it to, you're single. Let's say you don't even choose to ever get in a romantic relationship. You are going to develop a dialogue between parts of yourself inside that's going to transform your life and only make it better. And I really do take an approach that is, I think, direct but gentle, where this isn't going to open up stuff in a way that overwhelms you. I think you're going to find a lot of insight about your attachment styles, about your family of origin, your childhood, why you do what you do. It's very normalizing. And it's really at the end of the day about let's be our best selves as women because we're amazing, as everybody, of course. I don't want to leave anybody out, but really for women to find that sweet spot and not have to wait till we're 60 or 70 to feel comfortable in our own skin and really have our voice.
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is The Cost of Quiet: How to Have the Hard Conversations That Create Secure, Lasting Love by Colette Jane Fair. And I would say also go follow Colette on social media because you're always giving great tips and advice and videos and quotes and all the good stuff. I just would love to say I appreciate your honesty and vulnerability because it's very hard for me to connect with books that I'm gonna learn from if I don't feel the author really opened up and is vulnerable also, right? And is in the journey with me. And I very much felt that in this book. And it's written so easy to read. And if you're a busy mom, you can pick up different pieces and read them at different times. And there's an audiobook coming out too, I know. So you can listen to it quietly. We appreciate you so much, Colette, and I know this book is going to change so many lives and for so many generations. And you can get it, pre-order it now, and get it wherever books are sold. Colette, thank you for taking the time and for stopping by and for taking the time to write this manifesto that is going to change many lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.